In 2013, the richest football club in the world faced a nightmare no one expected. Manchester United, the global powerhouse of English football, a team that had dominated the Premier League under Sir Alex Ferguson for 2 decades, suddenly looked lost. Not on the pitch, not in the dressing room, but at the heart of what really drives modern football: money, power, and control. At the time, United were worth over $3 billion, more than Real Madrid, Barcelona, or Bayern Munich. They had the biggest stadium in England, the most lucrative sponsorships, and a fan base that stretched from Manchester to Mumbai, Lagos to Los Angeles. United weren't just a football club, they were an empire. But empires fall. And this one would collapse in slow motion. It began with Ferguson's retirement in May 2013.
5 FA Cups, 4 League Cups, 10 Charity Community Shields, 1 European Cup Winners' Cup, 1 European Super Cup, 2 Champions League titles, Intercontinental Cup, 1 FIFA Club World Cup, and 13 Premier League titles. The impossible dream made possible by the greatest British manager ever, Sir Alex Ferguson.
To fans, it was the end of an era. To bankers and investors, it was the beginning of a crisis. The man who had been United's greatest competitive advantage, the manager who delivered 13 Premier League titles, 2 Champions Leagues, and countless millions in prize money and TV revenue, was gone. What followed was chaos, expensive transfers that failed, managers who couldn't handle the pressure, and a stadium once feared now crumbling under neglect. United still made money, hundreds of millions every year, but their success on the balance sheet could not hide the failure on the pitch. For the first time in modern history, Manchester United became a club where money was spent recklessly, not wisely. Where sponsorships mattered more than trophies. Where debt, imposed by billionaire owners, drained the lifeblood of football's most famous team. And while rivals like Manchester City, Liverpool, and Chelsea surged ahead with smart investments and modern strategies, United's empire sank into mediocrity. This is the story of how Manchester United, the club that once defined football greatness, collapsed. From the genius of Ferguson to the failures of his successors. From financial dominance to financial mismanagement. From glory to a warning of how quickly football's kings can fall. Because at Old Trafford, history isn't just about titles. It's about how power, greed, and broken leadership turned the world's greatest football club into its biggest cautionary tale. To understand Manchester United's collapse, we need to go back to where the modern empire began. When Sir Alex Ferguson walked into Old Trafford in 1986,
well, no emergency votes will rescue Ron Atkinson, sacked by Manchester United this week and replaced by Alex Ferguson. The start, perhaps, of another new chapter for United, certainly the start of another football focus for us.
The club wasn't the global juggernaut we know today. Far from it. United were a fading giant. The club hadn't won a league title in nearly 20 years. Liverpool were the kings of English football, dominating both at home and in Europe. Old Trafford was still a fortress. But financially, United weren't the richest, and their trophies weren't keeping pace with their history. Ferguson's early years were brutal. He inherited a squad lacking discipline, a culture built on complacency, and a fan base growing impatient. By 1989, banners were already calling for him to be sacked. But behind the criticism, Ferguson was quietly laying the foundations for something much bigger than just football. He revolutionized United's scouting system. He built a youth academy that would later produce the famous class of '92, David Beckham, Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, Nicky Butt, and the Neville brothers. This wasn't just football development. It was financial genius. These academy players would save the club tens of millions in transfer fees while becoming global superstars, their shirts selling by the millions across the world. And then came the Premier League. In 1992, English football was reborn. Television money exploded, broadcasting deals pumped billions into the game, and suddenly, clubs that knew how to win were rewarded like never before. Ferguson's United were perfectly positioned to dominate this new era. By 1999, when United pulled off the treble, winning the Premier League, FA Cup, and Champions League in one season, They weren't just champions on the field. They were a global brand. Sponsors lined up. Nike, Vodafone, AIG, and later Chevrolet, each deal worth hundreds of millions. United's red shirt wasn't just a jersey. It was an advertising billboard seen by billions. Old Trafford expanded. Matchday revenues soared. By the early 2000s, United were listed on the stock exchange, their value growing year after year. On and off the pitch, Ferguson had built a dynasty. But here's the twist. The very success Ferguson created, the winning machine, the money-printing empire, also made United vulnerable. When you dominate for too long, you attract more than fans. You attract businessmen, investors, and billionaires who see football not as sport, but as business. In 2005, that vulnerability became a reality. A family of American investors, the Glazers, took control of Manchester United in one of the most controversial takeovers in football history. They didn't buy United with their own money. They used debt, billions of it. And they placed that debt on the club itself. The Ferguson machine kept winning, masking the problems beneath. But the foundation had been cracked. And when Ferguson finally walked away, the cracks split wide open. By the mid-2000s, Manchester United weren't just a football club. They were a financial powerhouse, a machine designed to win trophies and print money at the same time. Sir Alex Ferguson had turned United into serial winners. From 1993 to 2013, he delivered 13 Premier League titles, 5 FA Cups, 4 League Cups, and 2 Champions League trophies. Every victory meant more than just glory, it meant prize money, broadcasting rights, sponsorship leverage, and global exposure. But Ferguson wasn't alone in shaping this empire. In 2005, the Glazer family completed their controversial takeover of the club. They borrowed heavily, around £790 million, and saddled United with debt, something unheard of in English football at the time. Fans protested in the streets. They feared the debt would destroy the club. And yet, on the surface, United kept rising. Ferguson's brilliance on the pitch hid the financial storm brewing off it. He kept delivering titles, which meant the club kept growing richer. Take 2008. United won the Champions League in Moscow, beating Chelsea on penalties. That year, the club's revenues surged past £256 million, making them the richest football team in the world. Cristiano Ronaldo was the star attraction, and when he left for Real Madrid in 2009 for a then-world record £80 million, United showed they could command transfer fees at the very top of the market. But the real rise wasn't just about transfers or trophies. It was commercial. United mastered the art of selling their brand. Deals with Nike, AIG, DHL, and later Chevrolet weren't just partnerships. They were lifelines, pumping hundreds of millions into the club. In 2012, the Chevrolet shirt sponsorship alone was worth over $559 million across 7 years, the biggest deal of its kind. Meanwhile, Old Trafford became a fortress of revenue. Expanded to hold over 75,000 fans, it generated more than £100 million a year in matchday income. And with the Premier League's global TV rights exploding, United's games reached over 1 billion viewers worldwide. By 2013, the numbers were staggering. United's value soared to more than $3 billion, making them the most valuable football club on the planet. They were richer than Real Madrid, bigger than Barcelona, more global than Bayern Munich. It seemed unstoppable. Ferguson was still winning. The sponsors were still queuing up. The Glazers were cashing in, paying themselves dividends while the club carried hundreds of millions in debt. And the fans? Many didn't see the cracks, because Ferguson made winning look inevitable. But here's the tragedy. The empire's success was built on one man's genius. One manager who could paper over the cracks of ownership, poor recruitment, and a growing reliance on money over football. And in May 2013, when Sir Alex Ferguson retired, the mask was ripped off. The rise had reached its peak. What came next would be chaos. David Moyes was handpicked as his successor, but he was walking into an impossible situation. The squad was aging. Recruitment had been neglected. Ferguson had squeezed the last drops of success out of a team that needed a rebuild. Moyes didn't just fail. He exposed how fragile United had become. The The summer transfer window of 2013 told the story. United scrambled, missing out on big names like Cesc Fabregas and Thiago Alcantara. They ended up overpaying £27.5 million for Marouane Fellaini, a panic buy that symbolized the start of United's transfer chaos. And chaos became the new normal. The managerial revolving door. After Moyes came Louis van Gaal, then Jose Mourinho, then Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and eventually Erik ten Hag. Each arrived with promises of restoring glory. Each left with the same story: money wasted, dressing rooms divided, results inconsistent. Van Gaal spent over £250 million in 2 seasons, bringing in Angel Di Maria for a British record £59.7 million, only to see him flop and leave after 1 year. Mourinho convinced the board to pay £89 million for Paul Pogba in 2016, then the most expensive transfer in football history. Pogba became the face of United's commercial machine, but never the leader on the pitch. In less than a decade, United spent over £1.5 billion on transfers, more than any club in Europe. Yet the return on investment was shocking. No Premier League titles. Just a handful of domestic cups. The biggest club in the world had become a graveyard for talent. Commercial success, football failure. Ironically, as United collapsed on the pitch, they soared commercially. New deals with Adidas and Chevrolet shattered records. The Adidas kit deal signed in 2015 was worth £750 million over 10 years. Sponsors didn't care about trophies. They cared about visibility. And United still had millions of fans watching every week. But this commercial obsession came at a cost. The club became more focused on global tours and marketing campaigns than footballing strategy. Signing Pogba wasn't just about midfield quality. It was about selling shirts in Asia. The same could be said for Alexis Sanchez, who arrived on astronomical wages of nearly £500,000 a week, only to score 5 goals in 45 games. The balance sheet looked strong. The football looked broken. The stadium that stopped growing. While rivals modernized, Old Trafford began to rot. Once the crown jewel of English football, the stadium leaked when it rained, seats rusted, and facilities fell behind. Meanwhile, Manchester City built the Etihad campus, a futuristic training and stadium complex. Tottenham unveiled a £1 billion arena in London. United's empire, built on global dominance, was crumbling at its core. Rivals take over. United's decline wasn't happening in isolation. Across town, Manchester City rose with Abu Dhabi's billions. They built smart, hiring Pep Guardiola, investing in infrastructure, and dominating the transfer market with precision. Liverpool, under Jurgen Klopp, rebuilt with a clear strategy, turning modest buys like Mohamed Salah and Sadio Mane into global stars. While United stumbled, City and Liverpool sprinted ahead. Between 2017 and 2022, the Premier League title became a 2-horse race between those clubs. United? They became bystanders. The debt that never left. And behind it all was the debt. In 2005, the Glazers takeover had saddled United with nearly £600 million in loans. 2 decades later, the debt remained, with annual interest payments draining tens of millions. By 2022, the debt had grown to £680 million, even as the club continued to generate revenues of over £600 million a year. Fans grew furious. The Glazers out movement filled Old Trafford with protests. Supporters stormed the pitch in 2021, forcing a game against Liverpool to be postponed. The anger wasn't just about money. It was about identity. United, once a football-first club, had become a business-first corporation. The symbol of collapse. The true symbol of United's climax wasn't a trophy. It was a statistic. From 2013 to 2022, United spent more than Manchester City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal, and Tottenham in the transfer market. Yet they finished outside the top 4 more times than they won major trophies. Money wasn't the problem. It was how the money was used. Poor recruitment. Poor leadership. Poor vision. And so, while Ferguson's empire had been built on unity, discipline, and long-term planning, United's post-Ferguson era became defined by short-term fixes, bloated wages, and chaotic leadership. The collapse wasn't a single event. It was death by 1,000 cuts. By the early 2020s, Manchester United's decline was undeniable. The numbers told one story. The football told another. But together, they painted the picture of a fallen empire. On the pitch, United no longer inspired fear. They were outclassed in Europe, humiliated in the league, and often fighting for a place in the top four rather than the title itself. Managers came and went, each promising change, each falling into the same trap. A club too big to ignore, yet too broken to fix. Off the pitch, the business was still booming. Revenues regularly crossed £600 million a year. Global fan base? Still unmatched. Sponsorships? Still record-breaking. But the money masked a deeper problem. United had become a brand before a football club. Players were signed not just for tactical reasons but for marketing campaigns. Old Trafford wasn't renovated because commercial tours and shirt deals made more profit than investing in infrastructure. And the debt? Still there. Nearly £680 million, a constant shadow, draining resources that could have rebuilt the squad or modernized the stadium. Fans saw it as betrayal. The Glazers saw it as business. Meanwhile, rivals redefined success. Manchester City built a dynasty under Guardiola, winning title after title. Liverpool rose from obscurity to win the Premier League and Champions League with Klopp's vision. Even Chelsea, through chaos, managed to capture Europe's biggest trophy again. United, the original kings, were nowhere near. The fall wasn't sudden. It was slow, painful, and humiliating. Every failed signing, every sacked manager, every broken promise chipped away at the aura of greatness. United, once the standard of excellence, became a meme. A warning. Proof that money alone can't buy success without leadership, vision, and strategy. And yet, the story isn't finished. United remain one of the biggest names in world football. Their fan base is loyal. Their revenues, even in crisis, are colossal. The Glazers may one day sell. New owners may invest. A visionary manager may restore discipline and identity. Football has a way of recycling greatness. But until that day, Manchester United's fall stands as a cautionary tale. The lesson? Even the greatest empires can collapse when greed replaces vision, when short-term profit replaces long-term planning, and when the genius of one man is mistaken for a permanent system. From Sir Alex Ferguson to failure, from empire to mediocrity, from kings of football to a brand in crisis, this is Manchester United's story. A reminder that in football, as in life, success is fragile. And if history has shown us anything, it's this: no empire lasts forever.